I've never known of a successful person in the upper brackets of success in any calling that hadn't acquired great potential powers of concentration upon one thing at a time. You've heard people speak of others, intending it to be derogatory, by calling them people with one-track minds. Have you ever heard that term?
Yes.
Well, anytime anybody says, I have a one-track mind, I want to thank him for it. Because there are a lot of people that have multi-track minds, and they try to run on all of them at the same time and don't make a good job on any. I have observed that the outstanding successes are people who have developed high capacity to keep their mind fixed upon one thing at a time. When you have learned to concentrate on one thing at a time, you have learned to key yourself up to where you can see yourself already in possession of the thing that you're concentrating on. Motives, the 9 basic motives, is the starting point of all concentration. In other words, you don't concentrate unless you have a motive for doing it. If you want to make a lot of money, for instance, let's say you want to buy an estate, a farm, and you concentrated on money in the upper brackets, you would be surprised at how that concentration would change your whole habits, attract to you opportunities for making money that you never thought of before. I know that's the way it worked out because some years ago I wanted a 1,000-acre estate. Of course, I didn't know at that time just how much 1,000 acres was, but I was concentrating on 1,000 acres. And it cost approximately $250,000 to get the land that I was looking for, and that was a lot more money than I had at that time. But almost from the very day that I fixed in my mind the size of estate that I wanted, opportunities began to open up and develop for me to get that money, and in larger blocks and hunks than I'd ever gotten it before. The royalties on my books commenced to increase. Demand for my lectures commenced to increase. Demand for my business counsel commenced to increase. So I had just sold myself on the idea that I had to have the money, I was going to get it, I was going to render service for it. I got the estate. I didn't get 1,000 acres, I got 600 acres. And the man from whom I bought it, when I told him that I wanted 1,000 acres, he said, I have 600. By the way, do you know how much 600 acres are? I said, well, I have a rough idea. He said, would you mind walking around this estate with me? Well, we started out bright one morning with a couple of golf sticks. We took the golf sticks along to knock the rattlesnakes in the head with. And we started around the outer edge of that, and we walked until noontime, and we weren't more than halfway around it, up and down over the Catskill Mountains. Noontime, he says, we're just about halfway around. I said, well, instead of going all the way around, let's just turn and go back. I've seen enough. 600 acres is plenty. Well, I bought the place. Then the Depression came on, 1929, 30, and 31. And believe you me, it was tough going. But I had accumulated enough money to buy the place. I wouldn't have had it if I hadn't have concentrated on that idea. Then next, the definiteness of purpose, or of an obsessional proportion, is the moving spirit back of the motive. Now, there's no use of having a motive unless you put obsessional desire or obsessional purpose back of it. Now, what's the difference between an ordinary purpose or desire and an obsessional desire? What's the difference? That's right. That's very good. That word intensity is a very good one. It's a very fitting word. In other words, to wish for a thing or to hope for a thing doesn't cause anything to happen. But when you put a burning desire or an obsessional desire back of a thing, why, it moves you into action and it attracts you to others and attracts things to you that you need in order to fulfill that desire. And also, how do you go about developing an obsessional desire about anything? By thinking about a lot of things, changing from one thing to another? No. You select one thing, you eat it, you sleep it, you drink it, you breathe it, you talk about it as long as you can find anybody to listen. If you can't find anybody, you talk to yourself. That's right, repetition. Keep on telling your subconscious mind exactly what you want, make it clear, make it plain, make it definite, and above everything else, let your subconscious mind know that you expect results. And no fooling. Then organized endeavor or personal initiative is the self-starter that starts the action on concentration. And then applied faith is the sustaining force that keeps action going. In other words, without that applied faith, when the going gets to be hard, and it will, no matter what you're doing, you would either slow down or maybe quit. So you can see that you need applied faith to keep your action keyed up to a high degree even when the going is hard and when the results are not coming in as you would like them to come. And by the way, did any of you ever hear of anybody starting out to do anything and achieving an outstanding permanent success right from the start without any opposition? Did you ever hear of anybody like that?
No.
Well, don't look now. But I want to tip you off to the fact that nobody ever did that, and probably nobody ever will. The going is hard always with everyone, no matter what you're doing. And you've got a tremendous amount of information back of every one of these lessons that you can concentrate on. But you'll have to concentrate on every one of these lessons when you come to it. Put everything else aside and concentrate on that lesson, and add to these notes everything that you can get that's related to this subject. You'll have to come back to it many times. And when I say you'll have to concentrate on each lesson, that means that you'll have to come back to each lesson many, many times. Have to keep thinking about each one. But while you're concentrating on a given lesson, don't let your mind be running over all the other lessons. Stick right straight to that one lesson while you're at it. Then the master mind is the source of allied power necessary to ensure success. Can you imagine anybody concentrating on the attainment of something of an outstanding nature without making use of the mastermind and the brains and the influence and the education of other people? Did you ever hear of anybody achieving an outstanding success without the cooperation of other people?
No.
I never have, and I have been around quite a bit in this success field, about as much as the average, maybe more than the average, and I have never found anybody yet in the upper brackets of achievement in any line that didn't owe his success very largely to the friendly, harmonious cooperation of other people, to the use of other people's brains and sometimes other people's money. You know, they do that once in a while, too. So you need the mastermind alliance in your concentration if you're aiming for anything above mediocrity. Of course, you can do your own concentrating on failure. That way you won't need any help on that. Won't need any mastermind on that, but also you'll have a lot of volunteer help on it, and a lot of good company along. Well, I say a lot of company, let's put it that way, if you just aim to fail. But if you're going to succeed, you've got to follow these regulations as I'm laying them down for you. You can't escape them, and you can't neglect any one of them. And then self-discipline is the watchman that keeps action moving in the right direction, even when the going is difficult. And incidentally, there's where you need self-discipline the most, is when you meet with opposition, or when the conditions and circumstances that you've got to cut through are difficult. There's where you'll need your self-discipline to keep your faith going and keep yourself determined that you're not going to quit just because the going is hard. So you couldn't possibly get along in concentrating without self-discipline. Oh, you could if everything went your way. It'd be no trouble at all. You could concentrate on anything if everything was going your way and you didn't need to meet these difficult circumstances. Then the creative vision or imagination is the architect that fashions practical plans for your action back of your concentrating. Before you can concentrate intelligently, you've got to have plans. You've got to have an architect, and that architect is your imagination and the imaginations of your mastermind allies if you have them. What happens when you start out to do something without a definite or a practical plan? Did you ever hear of anybody who had a very fine objective or a very fine purpose or a very fine idea, but it failed because he didn't have the right kind of a plan for putting it over? Did you ever hear of anybody like that?
Yes.
Have you ever heard of any other kind except that? Is that a common pattern, as a matter of fact, for people who have ideas, but their plans for carrying them out are not good, not sound? And then going the extra mile is the principle that ensures harmonious cooperation from others. Going the extra mile. You need that in the business of concentrating. If you're going to get other people to help you, you've got to do something to put them under obligation. So you've got to give them a motive. Even your mastermind allies that are in your own organization, they won't serve as mastermind allies without a motive. And what are some of the motives, incidentally, that would get people to join you in a given undertaking? What are some of the motives? What's the most outstanding motive? The desire for financial gain, of course. In all business and professional undertakings, I would say the desire for financial gain is the outstanding motive. And if you're going into a business that's where the main object is to make money, and if you don't allow your mastermind allies or your key men and women or the people who are helping you most, if you don't allow them to get sufficient returns, you're not going to have them very long. They'll be going into business for themselves. They'll be going over to your competitors and whatnot. I was very astounded once to hear Mr. Carnegie, Andrew Carnegie, tell me that he paid Charlie Schwab $75,000 a year salary, and on some years a bonus in addition to his salary of $1 million. Did that several years. And to me, that was a lot of money then. It's still a lot of money now. And I was curious about Mr. Carnegie, and I wanted to know why a man of his great intelligence would pay one man like that a bonus of more than 10 times as much as his salary. And I said, Mr. Carnegie, did you have to do that? Well, he said, no, certainly I didn't. I could let go and let him go out and go into competition with me. Sure, I didn't have to do it. There's quite a bit of meaning back of that statement. In other words, he got a good man there that was very valuable to him, and he wanted to keep him. And he knew that the way to keep him was to let him know that he'd make more money with Mr. Carnegie than he would without him. Then the applied golden rule gives one moral guidance to the action in connection with what one is concentrating. Then accurate thinking saves one from daydreaming and the creation of plans. And did you know that most of the so-called thinking is nothing in the world but daydreaming or hoping or wishing? That's what it is. There are a lot of people in this world who spend the vast majority of their time daydreaming and hoping and wishing, thinking about things, but never doing what?
Anything else?
Never taking any actual, physical, or mental, concrete action in carrying out their plans. I had an experience a long time ago when I was lecturing over in Des Moines, Iowa, on this philosophy. After the lecture was over, an elderly man tottered up or waddled up to the stage. He was decrepit and not very strong. And he fished around in his pocket and came out with a great bundle of papers that had dog ears on them. And finally he fished around amongst those papers and he came up with one on yellow paper. And he said, nothing new, Mr. Hill, in what you just said. Said, I had those ideas 20 years ago. Said, there they are on paper. I had those ideas. Sure he did. Millions of other people had them too. But nobody did anything about them. Nothing new in the philosophy, not a thing new in it, except the law of cosmic habit force. That's the only new thing about it. And that, strictly speaking, is not new. That's Emerson's, that's a proper interpretation of Emerson's essay on compensation, but stated in terms that people can understand the first time they read it. Yes, there he was. He carried those ideas around his pocket, and he could have been the Napoleon Hill instead of me if he'd have only gotten busy back before I started. Some of these days, some smart fellow will come along, and he'll take up right where I stop, and he'll create a philosophy based on what I've done that'll be far superior perhaps to this. Maybe that person sits right in this room now. And then learning from defeat ensures one against quitting when the going is hard. Isn't it a marvelous thing to know that in this philosophy you have learned beyond any question of a doubt that failure and defeat and adversity needn't stop you, that there's a benefit in every such experience?
Yes.
What is that benefit? Tell me. Can you see any benefit in a man going through a depression and losing all of his money, right down to the last penny, having to start all over again? Well, if you can't, you take a good look now, because you're looking at a man who did just that. And it's one of the greatest blessings that ever came along, because I was getting just to be a kind of a smarty pants. I was making too much money and making it too easily, and I had to get taken back a notch. I came out fighting, and I have done more good work since that time than I ever did before, and without that experience, I probably would be up there on my estate in the Catskill Mountains instead of down here teaching. Sometimes adversity is a blessing in disguise, and oftentimes not so much disguised at that, if you take the right attitude toward it. You can't be whipped, you can't be defeated until you have accepted defeat in your own mind. Just remember that. And remember that no matter what the nature of your adversity is, there is always that seed of an equivalent benefit if you will concentrate on the circumstance and look for the good that came out of it instead of the bad. Don't spend any time brooding over the things that are lost or gone or the mistakes that you have made. Except put in some time analyzing them and learning, profiting by them so that you won't make the same mistake twice. And thus it will be seen that controlled attention involves the blending and the application of many of the other principles of the philosophy. Persistence should be the watchword behind all of these principles. Controlled attention is the twin brother of definiteness of purpose. Just think what you could do with those two principles. Definiteness of purpose, knowing exactly what you want, and concentrate everything you've got on the carrying out of that purpose. Do you know what would happen to your mind, to your brain, and to your whole personality and to yourself if you would concentrate on one definite thing? And by concentrating on it, I mean to put all of the time that you can possibly spare when you're not sleeping and not working to earn a living, all of the time that you can possibly spare, seeing yourself in position of the thing that represents your definiteness of purpose. Seeing yourself in position of it, seeing yourself building plans for attaining it, working out the first step that you can take, and then the second, and then the third, and so on, concentrating on it day in and day out. In a little while, you'll get to the point at which every way you turn, you'll find something in the way of an opportunity that'll lead you a little bit closer to the thing that represents your definiteness of purpose. When you know what you want, it's astounding how many things you will find that are related to exactly what you want. I was living in Florida some years ago, and I had a very important letter coming to the Tampa, Florida post office. I knew the letter came because I talked on the long distance to the National City Bank in New York, and I knew that letter was in the mail and was down at the post office. I had to have it before 12 o'clock. I called the postmaster, who was a friend of mine, and he said the mail for I lived out in the country, 10 miles out. He said that mail is somewhere between here and Temple Terrace. It's out on the route number 1, and I don't know of any way for you to get that letter before 12 o'clock except to run the postman down. And he said, I'll tell you which station is where to start, because he's already passed station number 9, I think it was. He says, you pick him up there, and I'll give you the instructions how to follow his route. Well, route number 1 came over the same highway at long distance that I used in traveling from Tampa out to Temple Terrace at my home. I traveled it every day. I didn't know there were any mailboxes on it, but when I began to be important for me to observe mailboxes, I won't tell you, I never saw so many mailboxes in all my life. Believe me, they looked to me like every 100 feet almost there was a mailbox. And they were all numbered. And I was looking for the number that the postmaster had given me as the one that he would probably be at that very hour. Well, I finally caught up with him, and it was on a Monday. And he had an enormous load of mail. Why, he said, man, I can't do anything. I can't do anything about that. I don't know where your letter is. And says, I won't know until I get rid of all. I said, listen, fellow, I have got to have that letter. It's in there. I have got to have it. I said, the postmaster told me to run you down and not to take no for an answer, to tell you to get out and sort that mail and let me have that letter. Now, that's what he told me, and if you don't think so, come right over here to this farmhouse and you can call him. Well, he said, it's unlawful. I can't do that. Oh, I said, unlawful or not, I've got to have that letter. Now, that's all there is to it. Now, listen, fellow, be a good sport. There's no use you and me arguing. You've got a job to do, and I've got a job to do. Mine's important, too, and yours is important. And it's not going to hurt you very much to move that mail. You can do it in a little while. Oh, hell, he said, all right. So he went to work, and the third letter that he picked out was mine. Third one, he didn't. Just one of those things, you know, when you know what you want, somehow or other you're determined to get it, it's not near as difficult to get as you thought it was. I've often thought of that experience, how indicative that is of the experiences of people who know what they want and are successful in getting. They don't let anything stop them at all. In opposition, why, they just don't pay any attention to opposition. I've often watched Mr. Stone, my distinguished business associate, Mr. Stone, and his talk to his salesman. I tell you, I get a thrill every time I hear him speak. Because that man doesn't, I don't believe he knows what the word no means. I think he's long since believes it means a yes. That's right, and the results he gets show that he believes it means yes. He can be the most definite about the things he wants of anybody I've ever known, and the most definite in failure in refusal to accept a turn down. In other words, when objects get in his way, he just goes right over them, or around them, or he blows them out of the way. But he never lets them stop him. Now that's concentration. That's definiteness of purpose, put into action. Take Henry Ford, for instance. Now, everybody knows what his obsessional definite purpose was. Everybody knows it. Most people have been riding a part of his major purpose around every day of their lives, driving it. It was a low-priced, dependable automobile, wasn't it? He didn't allow anybody to talk in. There were promoters that go. I have heard promoters approach Mr. Ford with opportunities that seemed to me most glittering. And his reply always was that he was engaged in the thing that consumed all of his time and all of his effort. He was not interested in anything outside of his definite major purpose, which was to make and distribute all over the world low-priced, dependable automobiles. And of course, sticking to that job made him fabulously rich. There were hundreds of people that I saw come into the field and spend more money, infinitely more money than Mr. Ford had to start out with, and they went back into the graveyard of failure, and I couldn't find a dozen people in the world who would know what their names were. Men who were better educated than Mr. Ford, better personalities, had everything that he had and a lot more, except one thing. They didn't stick to the last. They didn't stick to the one definiteness of purpose the way that he did when the going was hard. Mr. Edison in the field of invention, there was a marvelous illustration of what concentration could do. And if you want the truth, I'll tell you that if Mr. Edison was a genius in any sense, it was because when the going was hard, then was when he turned on the most steam and didn't quit. Think of a man standing by and keeping on through 10,000 different failures as he did when he's working on the incandescent electric lamp. 10,000. Can you imagine yourself going through 10,000 failures in the same field without wondering if you shouldn't have your head examined? I was so astounded when I heard about that. I saw his logbooks. There were 2 stacks of them, that high. Each book about 250 pages in, and on every page there was a different plan that he had tried and it had failed. And I said, Mr. Edison, suppose that you hadn't found the answer. What would you be doing right now? He said, I would be in my laboratory working instead of out here fooling away my time with you. And I will say in his behalf that he grinned when he said it, but believe you me, he meant just exactly what he was saying. You know, infinite intelligence will throw itself on your side when it finds out that you're not going to quit until it does. If you do not give up when the going is hard, infinite intelligence will throw itself on your side. Remember, that's when the going is hard. You see there, you have your faith tested, you have your initiative tested, you have your enthusiasm tested, you have your endurance tested. And when nature finds out that you can stand the test and that you're not going to take no for an answer, she says, all right, you pass. Come on in. You're over. You're in. I think that nature or infinite intelligence or God or whatever you choose to call it, I think that first cause likes to convey information to people in simple terms and things they can understand. And surely this philosophy comes within that category. It wouldn't send the high school boy or girl to the dictionary or to the encyclopedia. You can read it or you can hear about it, you can understand it, and your own intelligence tells you the moment you come across one of these principles that it's bound to be sound. You just know that it is. You don't need any proof. you can see that it is. And it wouldn't have been in existence today if I hadn't concentrated through 20-odd years of adversity and defeat. So you see, it does pay to concentrate, and it does, my own experience corroborates what I said, that if you stand by when the going is hard and fail to quit, infinite intelligence will throw itself on your side. Now, I don't think that would be true in a case like that of Hitler's. No doubt he had a definiteness of purpose. No doubt he had an obsessional desire. But what was wrong with his definiteness of purpose? That is right. It ran counter to the plans of infinite intelligence, to the laws of nature, to the laws of right and wrong. And you may be sure that whatever you're doing will come to naught or come to failure, and you'll come to grief if it works a hardship or an injustice upon a single individual. What you must do, what you do, if you hope to have infinite intelligence throw itself on your side, is to be right. And you can only be right when everything that you do benefits everybody whom it affects, including yourself. Well, then take Christ's whole life was devoted to concentration upon developing a system of living for the brotherhood of man. He didn't fare too well while he lived, but on the other hand, he must have been doing the right thing, because what he was doing, even though after he passed on, he only had 12 people to start out with, and that's why I believe that what he was doing, what he was preaching, must have been right, because if it hadn't been right, it would have been destroyed and gone long before this. Because there is something in nature, or in infinite intelligence, which brings forth with every evil the virus of its own destruction. And that there's no exception to that. Every evil, everything that's not in conjunction with the overall plan of nature or the natural laws of the universe, brings with the circumstance itself the virus of its own destruction. Take William Wrigley, for instance. Mr. Wrigley, by the way, William Wrigley Jr., was the first man that ever paid me money for teaching him this philosophy. My first $100 that I ever made came from William Wrigley, the stenographer's friend. Well, just think what that man did on a 5-cent package of chewing gum. I never ride down Michigan Boulevard. I never see that building down there lighted on the river, lighted at night, that white building, and I don't think of what concentration can do even in connection with such a thing as a 5-cent package of chewing gum. The signers of the Declaration of Independence, and George Washington's and Abraham Lincoln's and Thomas Jefferson's concentration was to give personal liberties to all of the American people and eventually to the people of the world. It may well be that the freedom of mankind, this is the cradle for the birth of the freedom of mankind itself, because I know of no other nation on the face of this earth that is concentrating upon the freedom of the individual as we are doing here in the United States. And I know of no other philosophy, no other people engaged in any other study whose objective is